Someone has to realize that loss. It's a game of hot potato. Who's going to realize that loss? It's not going to be me. That's how I think about being a Bitcoiner. I don't know who's going to have to lose, how many wars are going to have to be fought, the political violence and fighting domestically that's going to have to go down. I just know I'm not going to lose because you can't debase, confiscate my time and energy, my money, my savings, my future.
That was Jack Mallers, CEO of Strike and one of the most outspoken voices in the Bitcoin space. And what he's describing isn't a theory. It's a $40 trillion hole in the U.S. balance sheet, a bond market that G7 nations are meeting in Paris to address right now, and a global debt system that, by his analysis, cannot survive the disruptions already in motion. In this episode, he breaks down exactly why. The consumer data, the bond market mechanics, and what Iran's settling trade in Bitcoin during an active conflict means for the future of money. Stay with me through this entire video because by the end, you'll understand why people who have been watching these numbers are not sleeping well right now. If this is new to you, subscribe. This channel covers the financial shifts most people don't hear about until it's too late.
Bitcoin doesn't negotiate. Listen, markets are taking a beating across the board. Bitcoin, gold, stocks have fallen off their highs. The bond market is getting its butt handed to it. There's a lot going on. I think it's fairly obvious, and I'm no genius. I think it's fairly obvious to everyone with a brain cell what's going on in global markets, what's going on in the Middle East, and so that is what we will talk about today. Let me check. Not a professional podcaster. Make sure I'm live. Oh, I'm live. It doesn't get more live than this. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's go. First and foremost, I said it's not a political podcast. I have no interest of hopping between the left, the right, the red, the blue, the up, the down, the wazzy, the woozy. You know that scene in Wolf of Wall Street? It's a wazzy, it's a woozy, it's fairy dust. That's how I feel about politics. Not my thing. I bleed orange. I'm a Bitcoiner. So instead of going back and forth between what the Iranian regimes are saying versus what Trump is saying versus this, we ask 4 questions every week to open the show, and they go as follows. 1, is the Strait of Hormuz still closed? Yes, it is. 2, is the conflict still ongoing? Yes, it is. 3, are global supply chains still disrupted? Yes, they are. 4, can global debt survive this disruption? No. In fact, it's starting to collapse because of it. Look at the bond market. Guys, the Jack Mallers Show, Mailbag Monday, the live chat, the YouTube commenters, yes, this strange corner of the internet, the Bitcoiners, we've been saying since the end of February that the Strait is not opening anytime soon, that this conflict is going to last a long time, that inflation is upon us, that global supply chains will be disrupted, that the bond market will collapse. This is only expediting the death of fiat. They're so indebted and they're so levered, they can't take a crisis, okay? Think of it this way. You guys ever do the exercise? I used to go to boxing with my dad when I was a kid, and they would do the exercise as a boxer. Here, I'm going to get up. You guys can see this. A boxer, look at me up in the closet. People say, that's a fake background. You're fake. Your face is fake. This background's real. When you're boxing, you got to be on the balls of your feet. Okay, the balls of your feet. And the instructor would do a drill with us where when you're on the balls of your feet and someone tries to push you, you can't push me down. I'm not going to fall backwards because my weight is even. My weight is forward. My weight is on my front foot sometimes. I'm on the balls of my feet. Now, when I'm on my heels, if I'm standing flat-footed and someone shoves my shoulders, I go tumbling backwards. Okay, think of it like that. Balls of your feet is not a lot of leverage, not a lot of debt, a sound footing, grounded, balanced. When we're standing on our heels, that's leverage, that's debt. Everything has to go perfectly for us to win that fight. If just a mere gust of wind or just a mere push to our shoulder tumbles us over and the whole thing collapses. And so something like the Strait of Hormuz, which causes a bunch of inflation, which causes supply chain shortages, it blows the entire Western financial system down. And you guys have to understand why that is, because people will relate and say, oh, no, this is just like the 1970s. Oh, no, this is just like the dot-com bubble in AI. This is just like the year 2000. No, it's not, because there's never been a time in human history where Western governments and Western civilization is so levered, is in so much debt. And you guys have to appreciate that, because every time people say, oh, this is just like that time, let me pull up a chart from 50 years ago and tell you how the world's going to proceed. No, absolutely not. Debt to GDP was not 120%. The United States government wasn't $40 trillion in debt. The whole Western civilization wasn't entirely levered with the expectation that things are going to go perfectly. This visual that you guys are looking at is the average hourly earnings of a private sector employee. And what do we mean by real wages? Well, again, if your wages are increasing at 1% a year on average, but inflation is 2% a year, you're working backwards, right? Put another way. Let's say your dream house is getting 5% more expensive every single year. Well, in order to make progress towards owning that home, you need to be getting at least a 6% raise every single year. And so by measuring real wages, we get to see, well, is the common man, is the average private sector employee, are they making progress towards owning things in their life, towards getting sufficient food, owning a home, paying off their car, paying down their student loans? And when real wages go negative, it means the things around them are getting more expensive than they're earning. Not good. Really not great at all. No duh, consumer sentiment is down. It doesn't matter what the stock market price is. And by the way, equal weighted S&P 500 is not at all-time highs. Just the S&P 500 as it's weighted today, and it's dominated by tech. So everyone in tech is making loads of money. Wall Street is making loads of money. But the everyday man, the everyday consumer, getting crushed. Real wages going negative. Sentiment never been worse. On the back half of that, delinquencies. So a lot of the American dream and the American lifestyle as we know it, and listen, I don't live in the UK, I don't know that much, but you'd have to assume a lot of the Western dream lifestyle is financed on debt, okay? People that, quote, own a home don't actually own it outright. They own it on a loan via a mortgage. People that own a car haven't paid it all off. They have an auto loan. People that went to college and got a degree, well, they're renting the degree. They haven't fully paid off the education that they got, okay? Now, if the consumer, if the everyday man is in pain, real wages are going negative, people are bleeding into their savings, AI is taking their jobs, what we would see as a sign of that is delinquencies going up. And on the money, credit card delinquencies are near post-global financial crisis highs. Look at this visual. Credit card delinquencies shooting up. Student loan delinquencies rocketing up. Auto loan delinquencies now rocketing up. Not good. Not good. And it's one thing to have pain in the street, but it gets to become a crisis when the pain in the street collapses the financial institutions that support the world as we know it, like banks. And how this is going to collapse banks is banks have all of these loans written and valued on their balance sheet. Let's say they're valuing these loans at par, at 100. If these loans are actually worthless because people have no ability to pay them back, because oil and gas is getting too expensive, because inflation is coming back, because AI is taking their job and they're now unemployed, some combination or all of those things, and they can't make their credit card payments, they can't pay off their student loans, they can't pay off their auto loans, then the bank's balance sheet that's full of these loans valued at 100 is now worthless. Then the bank doesn't have your deposits and we have a banking collapse. We have another financial crisis. Something to keep an eye on. The pain that the consumer is feeling is real, it's relevant, it matters. The K-shaped economy is not a joke, it's not the future, it's right now. And it is starting to pose systemic risk in the economy and to these institutions. I'm telling you right now, this cannot last that much longer. I'll get into it at a later slide. But an economy in a country that's this indebted, they cannot take this much pain before the whole thing falls apart. That's the difference between this and 2008. That's the difference between this and 2000. That's the difference between this and the 80s or the 70s is the amount of debt, the debt to GDP, the amount of expenses and interest that the United States has. These type of metrics are soul crushing to the Western idea that they can lose $2 trillion a year in deficits, that they can print as much money as they want, and that everyone in their countries is going to be happy, they'll own nothing, be happy, and have their American dream. My prediction remains the same. The only option they have left is intervention, is money printing, is monetizing the debt, is something like yield curve control. Either way, if the whole financial system as we know it collapses, that will be painful for everybody. Make no mistake about it. But Bitcoin will be a competitor, in my opinion, the winner of whatever we use next. If they intervene, print money, monetize the deficits, and basically inflate their way out of this, Bitcoin is a competitor for what we use next and will, in my opinion, be the winner. Either way, Bitcoin wins. There's the way that I think will go versus the way that we also could go. I think they'll just print the money. I mean, obviously, we cannot go a show without talking about it, is Iran adopting Bitcoin in maybe the biggest way in Bitcoin's history ever. So for those that missed the news, Iran officially adopted Bitcoin. They launched a Bitcoin-based insurance for Hormuz. If you want your ship to get through, more or less, you just give them some Bitcoin. And this is, to me, this is crazy. And I put this slide together. The trend towards Bitcoin as the new world reserve currency. You got El Salvador adopting it as legal tender. After that, Russia legalized it for cross-border trade. Then you have an official adoption of Bitcoin under the U.S. Strategic Reserve. Then you have state-level reserve legislation. So independent states within the United States have reserve legislation now adopted. And now, in the middle of war, global conflict, energy markets, global trade, you have Iran adopting Bitcoin not only as a store of value, but as a medium of exchange for Hormuz Settlement. This is what Bitcoin as the global world reserve currency actually looks like. Bitcoin is for the sanctioned, it's for the small, it's for the strategic, it's for all, it's for everybody. Money that even enemies can use. And this, again, this might be Bitcoin's biggest adoption moment. And Bitcoin does this. You know, I remember getting into Bitcoin and like some company partnered with PayPal, and it was more a press release than any actual product. It was a bunch of fluff and hype. But at the time, we were just dying for any outside validation that our crazy idea that this was actually the best money in mankind, we were just dying for external validation. And so we would go nuts when like PayPal partnered with BitPay to do something. None of it actually ever came out. None of it made any sense. All of it was fucking stupid, but we would go nuts. And it's funny just like how people value external validation, validation at all. Whereas something like Iran using Bitcoin for settlement during a war for 20% of the world's oil supply to pass through one of the most like sensitive and critical passages for global supply chains and energy consumption as we know it, people are like, meh. It's just funny how that works. It doesn't get bigger than this. Why? Iran needs to trade and use money with anybody. People they trust, people they don't trust. People that love them, people that are threatening to drop a nuke on their head. Because money is akin to water for a functioning society. It is a necessity. It is a technology we invented to solve for barter and scale human interaction. It is not that you don't have the option to be like, I'm not a big fan of money. It's not like, I don't like soda. I'm going to stick with water. I don't like money. I'm going to stick with barter. That's not an option. What grinds my gears is just that politics and politicians divide us. And listen, I know that the K-shaped economy, the fact that the S&P 500 is at all-time highs while Main Street is at all-time lows. People getting poorer and the rich getting richer. politicians dividing us. Now you have politicians and like socialism getting popular where everyone's trying to violate property rights. I know that these are all a function of policy. This is what happens when you print money out of thin air for 50 years. This is what happens when you're not governed by Mother Nature and the physical realities of the universe. This is what happens when proof of work is not a necessity. This is what happens when people can't lower their time preference and prioritize and value their future. This is what happens when human coordination struggles. When someone does something wrong, but instead of suffering for it and learning that they shouldn't do that, they get bailed out and they get rewarded for it. This is what happens. You get domestic fighting. You get a population that's trending more towards a civil war than prosperity. But what kills me is that politicians and politics are such an important part of all of our lives. And people derive their identity or where they want to live or the relationships that they have or the friends that they have or where they can work from it. Because make no mistake about it, they're all the same. Push comes to shove at the end of the day, and I'm not trying, I know that I'm going to get killed for that comment. I'm not trying to make light of some of the policies that are flat out wrong from both sides. From both sides. But the point is, this is the point. Well, look at this tweet real quick. The U.S. injected 9.9 million barrels of oil from its SPR into the market last week. That's a record high of over 1.4 million barrels a day. It's the second consecutive SPR record high flow rate. And the point is this reserve is for local crisis. Like it's literally for if there was some civil war, some local domestic crisis. Mind you, we've burned through almost all of it just to suppress gas prices for elections. So between the conflict in Iran and the conflict in the Ukraine, the left, the right, the blue, the red, it doesn't matter who they are. They have chosen short-term suppression for votes over long-term insurance for the people. We are now closer to $250 per barrel of oil than we've ever been because our reserves are pretty much empty and this war is pretty fucking real. And it's a reminder to the people, don't make politics your identity. Don't make politics where you can work, who you can date, who you can be around. Governments around the world have gotten too big. We are meant and belong to be governed by Mother Nature. We are a function of, a child of the universe. We want markets to be free. We want human interaction to be free. When these people take off all the makeup and all the clothes and all the banners and all the campaign slogans, at the end of the day, they're the fucking same. They choose short-term gain for long-term pain. They borrow from your kids and their time, their energy, their effort, their prosperity, and they spend it now for midterms. Both of them, both sides. It's all garbage. This is the perfect reminder to let everyone know, at the end of the day, from the highest level possible, there is no sides. You're either for Bitcoin, for free markets, for hard money, or you're not. Let me end it on this. No one's coming to save you. How about that? What if I phrase it that way? No one's coming to save you. Harmony in society will be restored when personal responsibility is valued again. No one's coming to save you. It doesn't matter who they elect. It doesn't matter where you live. It doesn't matter what big corporates try and tell you. Nobody's coming to save you. And that's the way it should be. Life is earned, not given. I've said, the world as you know it is a derivative of energy. Money and us earning wealth is all about who gets to consume how much energy, who gets to fly the private plane or sit in first class versus someone that has to walk across the country. Who gets to fly to Europe instead of having to canoe to Europe? Who gets the flat screens and the fancy phones and the big house to live their life and consume energy and consume entertainment? Who gets the 2-car garage that guzzles tons and tons and tons and tons of oil versus the person that has to take the bus. The world around you is just a derivative of energy, and earning capital is just a right to consume energy.
What Jack Mallers laid out today isn't a fringe argument anymore. It's backed by data that's publicly available. Real wages negative for the first time since 2022. Credit card and auto loan delinquencies approaching post-2008 highs. G7 finance ministers meeting in Paris specifically to address the bond sell-off. And Iran, a nation in the middle of an active military conflict. Settling trade through the Strait of Hormuz in Bitcoin. That last point deserves to sit with you. When a sanctioned nation at war chooses Bitcoin as its medium of exchange, not because it wants to, but because it needs neutral money that no government can freeze or confiscate. That is not a headline about cryptocurrency. That is a headline about the structural failure of the existing monetary system. Jack Mallers' position is this: the Fed cannot cut rates with inflation accelerating. It cannot raise rates without collapsing the bond market and the banking system with it. And it cannot allow the bond market to fall apart, because U.S. Treasuries are the collateral underlying the entire global financial system. That leaves one path: money printing. And historically, when governments print their way out of a debt crisis, hard assets win. Whether you hold Bitcoin, gold, real estate, or nothing at all, understanding what is happening in the bond market right now is not optional. This is the financial environment you are operating in. The question Mallers is really asking isn't whether you believe in Bitcoin, it's whether you have a plan for what comes next. If this breakdown was useful, subscribe and leave a comment below with what you think. Are the bond markets as fragile as he's describing? Is Bitcoin actually positioned to benefit? I read every comment, and this is exactly the kind of conversation worth having.